coming, and those of you on the phone for being here with us today. Welcome to this Pfeiffer-Wolf news event, providing a major update on the 4,000 embryo destruction at University Hospital's fertility clinic. I'll be referring to University Hospitals as UH throughout. I'm Joe Pfeiffer. I'm the managing partner at Pfeiffer-Wolf. Why are we holding this news conference today? Well, our work representing hundreds of victims of fertility misconduct cases has allowed us to represent some of the most courageous people across the country and here in Cleveland. Through this work, we've uncovered some extremely troubling things. The most troubling is that the fertility industry operates largely unregulated. In many states, your average nail salon is more regulated than a fertility clinic. Last summer, Pfeiffer-Wolf held a national news conference in Washington, D.C. to release a report recommending a complete overhaul of the fertility industry and the regulation of the clinics. That report concluded, and I'll quote, "For U.S. fertility centers, the result is a near Wild West situation where meaningful oversight is absent. Error reporting is essentially voluntary, and tragic cases of lost, destroyed, or otherwise improperly handled embryos is on the rise." Just as importantly, that report revealed that consumers have little or no access to relevant information. Not just about what works in IVF and what doesn't work, but just as importantly, what went wrong and where. There's no required reporting if a clinic loses someone's embryo. That's not right, and that has to change. Unfortunately, the situation in Cleveland with the UH embryo tragedy is a microcosm of everything that is wrong with the U.S. fertility industry. UH has admitted publicly that it failed, quote, in its handling of the embryo losses. It initially underreported the estimated number of embryos at 2,000. Then weeks later, they reported that actually it was double that amount. 4,000 embryos were lost. Since then, UH has disclosed additional information on what actually happened in its lab, and this comes right from UH. The freezer tank that they stored the eggs and embryos in that failed needed preventative maintenance. UH was manually filling the malfunctioning tank from the top. The embryology lab ran out of liquid nitrogen. The remote alarm for the affected tank, which was designed to alert the staff if there was a problem with the tank, it was turned off. We are here today to make sure that the victims of the UH tragedy know what's going on and what their rights and options are. We want to make sure this community understands what happened at UH. You'll hear in a moment from my partner Adam Wolf about how many UH embryo cases have been settled, about the 2 new cases that were filed today in Geauga County, and about the March 4th deadline that is quickly approaching for UH victims to seek justice. The UH victims who have not yet sought justice need to know this. There is still time to file your case and seek justice, but the time to act is now. Everyone processes their pain and trauma from losing their potential children differently. Our clients are no different from that. They chose now, before the deadline, where they still could seek justice, to file their case. They hope to get answers, and they hope to make sure that this never happens again, and that is our goal as well. There are still, by our estimates, a few hundred people who will need to decide whether to get counsel and file their cases between now and the 2-year anniversary of the failure, which is March 4th, 2020. If you're one of those people who is still searching for answers, I encourage you to step forward and work with us to make sure that this never happens again in Cleveland or elsewhere. That concludes my opening statement. I look forward to taking your questions during the Q&A. I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Joe. I am Adam Wolf, an attorney and a partner with Pfeiffer-Wolf. It has been my honor over the years to work on scores of embryo destruction and loss cases, including many here in Cleveland in the wake of the incident at university hospitals. As always, we are honored to work with and for those whose eggs and embryos were stored at university hospitals. I've been asked to provide an overview of 3 things, but first I want to make just a preliminary statement. This news conference is being held today in an effort to make sure that people who had their eggs and embryos stored at university hospitals know their options. All the people affected deserve a clear sense of what happened with their eggs and embryos. There should be full transparency and rigorous accountability. For nearly 2 years, many of the facts and details in this matter have been shielded by confidentiality. Through the 2 new cases we are filing today, the opportunity to bring this information to light for those affected at UH increases dramatically. We want to ensure that UH is held accountable for every victim and that these victims obtain compensation for their unimaginable losses. Additionally, we want to make sure that something like this never, ever happens again. In the aftermath of this event, victims in fertility centers around the country need to know how to avoid such incidents. So let's talk about what we know and what we can say. First, the deadline. The window for justice in these cases closes on March 4th, 2020. The second anniversary of the egg and embryo losses for several hundred families. We estimate that as many as 200 people who could file have not done so. And so they need to do some serious thinking over the coming days. Second, let's turn our attention to new cases. Ahead of that fast approaching deadline, Piper Wolf filed 2 new cases today in Geauga County. The first involves a woman who lost 9 eggs and has no children. The second involves a couple who lost 5 embryos, already have children, but wanted to expand their family. In both cases, the victims have allowed that the fact that they have filed be made public, but we wish to maintain their privacy. Their third and final area that I want to cover is the handling of the initial round of cases. There have been press reports that there have been as many as 150 settlements with UH to date. We, along with everyone else, are barred from discussing the financial and other terms, however. That concludes my opening statement. I look forward to receiving your questions.
Thanks, Adam. We are going to take questions and answers now, first from those of you in the room, and then those of you on the phone. The final portion of the call will be moderated over the phone, and I want to invite the operator on the line now to explain how that will work, and then we'll take the questions in the room. Operator?
Certainly. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you decide to withdraw your question, please press star, then 2 to remove yourself from the list. Please limit yourself to 1 question and a single follow-up. If you need to ask additional questions, please know that you may press star, then 1 to rejoin the queue. Thank you.
Okay, anyone in the room?
So
Sure, go ahead.
if a person chooses to file a case, what is the process to do so, and could they go through any law firm, not just yours?
Certainly. They could go through other law firms. We have a nationwide practice in IVF cases. We've represented hundreds of families across the country, not just in the UH case, but in other cases. But they should contact a lawyer. We think we're good, but I'm sure there are other people that would be good at it too. And they should then proceed to talk to that lawyer about how to file a case and what that entails.
You said you can't give us information on how much the settlements are, but are you saying that 150 have been settled?
All we can say, because we don't know for sure, these things are governed by confidentiality agreements, is that there was a news report that was public, that probably is still available online, that said that there had been approximately 150 settlements.
Can you tell us how many you're working on right now?
What we can say is that we have spoken to over 100 people who had their eggs and embryos stored in the tank at university hospitals, and we just today filed cases on behalf of 2 households who had eggs and embryos in the tank.
Can you speak to when you all did agree to extend the deadline for another year? Has this past year kind of maybe helped, or have you seen it, a lot of families maybe come forward, or individuals come forward because of the extension?
I think, as I said earlier, it takes, when something like this happens to a family, it's basically the worst day in their life. It really is. And so it takes a while for people to process that. And, generally speaking, their first thought is I need to call a lawyer. And that's proper. They should deal with their grief in their own time. And so, yes, the fact that there is a 2-year deadline instead of 1, I think, hopefully gives more people time to process this and get into a mindset where they want to seek answers and justice. It's a difficult process, and it's personal.
And I know you guys are saying of how many families or people you've spoken to, not necessarily the cases, but would you say that you've spoken to more in the past year than you did in the first year?
I don't know. It's sort of it's been. I think it's been kind of on balance, sort of spread out.
Why should people who didn't have embryos or eggs in that tank, why should they care about this story?
Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. We have worked on incidents of egg and embryo destruction and losses around the country. I think what we all can agree on, and I'm sure University Hospitals agrees with this too, is that this should never, ever happen again. And so if there are lessons to be learned from this, maybe other clinics can do what they need to do to avoid this from happening.
And, we have, through our work in this space, I've learned an awful lot about just a personal experience with fertility issues, and I have learned a lot about it. And fertility issues impact about 1 in 10 families. And so IVF is becoming more and more prevalent. It's a way, when done correctly, it's a miracle, really, that you can have a baby. But when handled improperly or recklessly, and then they don't even have to tell anyone about it, that's a tragedy. That gives false hope and destroys dreams. And that's why they should care about it, because that's just not right.
You mentioned when you all were in DC and recommending overhaul of this entire system.
Yes.
Are you seeing any headway or any progress on that?
Go ahead.
We are. We've spoken with a number of state legislators around the country about sort of bills that can be enacted, ways to try to prevent some incident from happening at fertility clinics, regulations that may prevent incidents from happening at fertility clinics. I think, we can all agree that people should not lose their eggs and embryos at a fertility clinic. Those should be stored for people to decide when and if they want to use them.
And just to help clarify for me, is it a state-by-state thing right now, or is it federal across the board?
It is largely a patchwork of state regulation, if any regulation at all. What we find in many states is that there is virtually no regulation. And that should be something that concerns all of us.
I mean, Adam and I should not be able to go open a fertility clinic. We just shouldn't. We're good lawyers. But we're not qualified to do that. In some states we could.
Is there anybody on the phone?
At this time, I'm showing no questions from the phone, but again, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so by pressing star then 1.
Anyone else in the room?
March 4th, the day of March 4th, they could still file, or is that?
Yeah, I would do it on March 3rd. That's not something I want to toy with. We don't want, a day, or just, I'd like to talk to all the families that haven't decided. And I think that all the families that are still struggling with what, if anything, they want to do about this, it does not hurt you to get advice from someone who's competent. We're competent. There are other lawyers in town that are competent to do that. But you really ought to talk to someone to find out what your options are. And, you don't have to do it today. You don't have to do it tomorrow. But time is, unfortunately, running short. And if you get past the March 3rd or March 4th deadline, and then you realize, well, geez, I really would like to know what happened out there, or try and help that this didn't happen again, you're going to be out of luck. And I really don't want anyone to go unadvised, at least. People can make their own decision as to whether they want to file or not, but they should get some advice.
This seems like kind of a passion project for you guys on this litigation.
It is.
Is this something you can see yourselves down the road pushing for federal legislation?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, given this does not seem to be a partisan issue. If anything anymore is not a partisan issue, it's the ability for people to have children, and that the eggs and embryos that they go to an IVF clinic should be safely stored and kept track of. I mean, very, very basic human need. And so, absolutely, if we are attempting to, and hopefully we'll be getting traction to get some federal regulation on this. When we were in DC last, we brought over a expert from the UK on the National Health System, which has good regulations and rules to help prevent things like this. And they're very common sense rules and regulations. And so I guess to answer your question, absolutely this is a passion project. This is some of the most important work that we do, and we're very, very lucky to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why in some ways this is a passion project for us. It's because we receive calls every week, sometimes many calls a week, from people who have suffered at the hands of various fertility clinics. They have had eggs and embryos lost. They have had eggs and embryos discarded. We have had issues of the wrong embryo being transferred to somebody. We have issues where it turns out that the child born from a so-called anonymous sperm donor ends up being biologically related to the fertility doctor. These are all issues that unfortunately we receive calls about all the time, and we think that it's time for us to do something about it.
And frankly, if we could get change in this field and we could stop having, I mean, look, we enjoy this work, obviously. It's great work. But if this work dried up because everybody got their act together and they followed good, strict rules and regulations, we will go find something else to be passionate about. If we don't have to be on the phone or flying around the country meeting with families that are devastated on the worst days of their lives, we'll do something else, and we'll gladly do something else.
That's the end game for you guys.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.